Okay, so here in this video, we're going to take a look back at HTML forms, and I'm going to show you some more of the form elements that you can use to create forms in your HTML. So let's get to it. And here you have, I have my forms.html. I've created a form here, and as you can see here, this one's tied to my practice.html, which we'll take a look at once we submit. So again, inside the form, I showed you last video how to create text boxes. Let's just recap that and put in a label here for name, and we'll ask the user to enter your name. Provide it with a little bit of spacing, and then we are going to come down and put an input. Type text. The name I'm going to provide this is going to be name, and then we'll provide it here an ID which attaches to the for. So we'll actually call this name field, right? The for name field, and this is the ID name field. All right. Whereas the name is name. All right. That's the information we're collecting. So there's we get the user's name, and this, we're going to kind of be creating a survey, right? So we saw this before, type text, it gives me a text box. Some other things we can do is, let's go ahead and create a new label, and we can create a slider bar, right? We can take in information and let the user rate a certain characteristic. So I'm going to call this is for the rating slider, and then we'll say, please rate your experience. All right. So I'm also going to create a couple more labels here because this slider bar is going to be just there, right? And we want to be able to, let's go ahead and put a BR in here. And then we'll come down here and create a label. That's not right. There we go. Again, this label is going to be for the rating slider as well. And this is going to be very little. And then we'll come in here and we'll actually put the input now. So input type range, all right? So the range is the type, and that's going to create the slider bar. So we'll set our type as range. The name I'm going to give it would be rating, and the ID here is going to be rating slider. All right? So there's that. Let's go ahead and create a new label. That's going to be on the other side of the slider. And instead of very little, we'll say all pro. And now, if we go ahead and run this, we have enter your name, and we needed to put a BR tag here before that label. So let's just go ahead and put a BR. Refresh that up, and there we go. Enter your name, please rate your experience, very little, all pro. So I can take this and slide it wherever I feel I am in terms of experience, and they have a nice clear understanding of what the two extremes are and where they can rate themselves on their experience. All right, so that seems to be able to slide nice back and forth, and you can set some minimum and maximum values for that, right? So this range can take in a couple more attributes. We can set a min value, and we're going to say 0. We can set a max value of, let's say, 5. So now when I refresh this, you can see it goes not as smoothly. It's more of incremental changes, right? And you can see though, I can do this 5 to 0 to 5, 0 to 100. And now, as I move it, you see it gets that nice smoothness because I'm even using the arrow keys. That's because I have a max of 0, a max of 100, min of 0. So there's 101 different increments to move from. So you can kind of adjust that. Do you want it to jump up and down? Do you want it to be, so we can just set it for 4. And you see now if I go up, let me click there. And now you can go over and you see it just kind of jumps a lot more. It's a lot less choices to kind of pick from. All right, so that's the max and the min, and that's what's going to be determining the value, right? The value is wherever it's located. The min and the max kind of help you restrict what those values are going to be. Okay, so there's a slider bar, right? So what else would you like to see? I would say you're probably going to need to do some checkboxes, right? So let's put a BR tag in here, and let's create a label here. And we can say this is for our language list, and please select all languages that you know. All right, and I'm going to put a BR under this because I want them to kind of be underneath each other. So we can do some inputs, and this text we're going to change to checkbox. So I can do a checkbox. Now this is very, very important. Each of these input checkboxes I'm going to create, I need to create one of these for each of these, okay? And actually we need to come down and we need to do one more label. So this is be for my first checkbox. Again, this is going to be a lang list. And what we're going to do here, actually, let's change this to lang list A. And this name would be languages. And the ID is going to be lang list A. All right. So, what do we want this to say? So we can start with HTML. All right. Oh, that's not. I didn't want that. I just wanted an actual word, HTML. So let's fix that. Just the word HTML. That's all I wanted. All right, and then we have a checkbox for HTML. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this, and let's make a few more. And so we'll do HTML, we'll do CSS, we'll do JavaScript, and we'll do Python. So these are the 4 languages we're learning this year. So list A, we'll change this to list B, we'll change this to list C, we'll change this to list D. All right? A, B, C, and D. Okay, so these are all going to be beside each other. I think what I want here is for this to come down, and we'll give it a BR. We'll break it so we have 2 and then 2. All right, so let's take a look what that looks like. So here we have, please select the languages that you know. We have HTML, we have CSS, JavaScript, Python. So these are the languages you've worked with, you understand, you know. You can check all of them, right? They're all checkable and uncheckable, right? And that just indicates that checkboxes are nice because you can select multiple options, right? And then when you submit, those 3 values all get sent to the same name, languages. So we need to actually add the value in here. So value equals HTML, and then we'll do a value here, and let's do CSS. So we got to add these values in, and the names are all the same, but the values are different, and that's because each one has its own value, but they're all tied to the same name. So names can have multiple values. There we go. And now when we click on those boxes and we submit, the values will all be attached to the same name, but with multiple values. All right, so anytime I want to know what the languages are, I just go and look for this submission, and it could have up to 4 values. It could have 0, it could have 3, it could have 2. And there we go. All right, so that is a checkbox. We could also have, let's go ahead and put a BR tag in here. We could have some questions that is select one, right? You can't have multiple options. So let's create a label here. So we could put in here, this is for, we'll call it a preference. We'll say preferred style. All right, and so we'll ask, let's go here and we'll add a BR, and then we'll give it our checkboxes. So again, these are inputs, and type radio. So radio is going to be a circle, all right? And so we'll give this a name of preference, and we'll give this an ID for style A. Again, we need to create a label for each of these inputs. So the first label, preferred style, is giving us the question, right? And it doesn't necessarily need to be a label. If it's a question, then you're having labels for the inputs. But each of these checkboxes need to have their own labels. So we'll call this style A. And we'll say online. So that's the label. It's for style A, which is online. And then this style here has the name preference, style A. Let's give it a value of online. And then we can come down here. We'll go ahead and give this a BR. We'll put them all on separate lines. And we'll do a label for style B. And that's going to be in person. And we'll give that another input. Radio. Name preference. And this is really important that you get these names correct, and I'll show you why. Let me actually do value. All right, and let's just do one more here. We'll copy this label and input. We'll just change some stuff here. Save some time of my typing. So style C, and we'll do hybrid. Radio preference style C, and the value hybrid. Okay, so let's check out what that looks like. And which style do you prefer? Online, in-person, hybrid. Now notice the difference, right? With this, I can check any box, but when I do, it deselects what I had previously selected. But the check boxes, which are more squares, I can select as many as I want. All right, and that's the difference between a radio and a checkbox. Now, if I change the name here, Let's say I call this preference A, and these two are preference. Now when I come back here, and I select online, which was preference A for the name, in person is preference. So now because there's two separate names, it allows me to check both. But in person and hybrid have the same name. So these are going to switch back and forth. Now the problem with a check or with a radio is that once you select it, it's selected. There's no way to deselect it, right? I can't unselect this with just HTML. So if you want to be able to toggle back and forth, you're probably going to need a single checkbox so they can say yes or they can say no. But a radio button will not allow you to do that. So if you use radio buttons, you're probably going to have at least a minimum of two options so that they can toggle back and forth between the two. Okay? So that's the difference. Let me go ahead and set this back to preference so that all three are tied together again. So those are our values, right? Another option we can do here with input, which will be our last input we're going to do here, is I'll do a label and I'll say for number of classes. Or we'll simplify that to class number. Or we'll say class period. All right, so so there's my label. Let's go ahead and give this a input. And now I want to get numbers, right? So I just say number. And name is going to be period. ID will attach to the 4, so class period. Right? And we'll give this. Now we can set a min and max. So my min will be 0. Sorry, my min should be 1. And my max should be 8. And go ahead and refresh this. And please enter your class period. Now see, I can move it up. I can't move it down because 1 is my min, and they can just cycle through here. When they get to 8, it's maxed out. So this is the number, and it's sort of like the slider bar, that's a range, right? Except here you see numbers, you don't see the incrementing. But you can step it, right? We can do different steps here. So I could do a step of 2. So now when I refresh and come back to my page, and I'm down here, if I hit up, see it starts at 1 and it counts by 2s. There's no option to get an even class. All right, so that's stepping. I can do 3s, I get stepping by 4s, and it just counts up by that value, starting at the minimum and counting up by that value. All right, but I'm not going to have that in there. And those are the input fields. All right, we have a couple other options you can look at here, but let's just get into those real quick. We're going to look at drop-down boxes, because these check boxes and these radio buttons, they're nice, but they can kind of take up a lot of space. So we can also do some drop-downs. So let's do a label. Let's do for school, right? Or we'll do year. All right, so please enter your year. All right, and we'll put we won't break it here. So now we're not going to do an input for this. So this is a select, and for this name, we're going to do year, and the ID will be year so that it matches the 4. Now select itself is a container. So each of these need options. The value, so we'll say freshman, and and then I'll type freshman here. And then we'll go here at the end, we'll do another option with a value of sophomore. And I think it's actually, if I'm correct, sophomore? I don't know, I'm not a spelling teacher. We'll leave it at that. And let's do another option for junior. Oop, not tab. And our last option. And we'll do senior. Okay. So with the select, your name and ID go up here. The options go inside of the select. And then we have our different choices that they can pick from. We forgot a break here. And now let's refresh again and take a look. Okay, so freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Now notice it automatically starts with freshman. But what if I wanted to leave it blank, right? Well, I could create an option here, and I'm gonna leave the value blank, but I can type in here, please select your year. All right, and then refresh this, and we can take a look. Now it says, please select your year, and then I can pick from all these different other options here. I could just leave it blank as well, but this kind of gives you some idea of how you can give it some text, some idea about what they want you to do with it. All right? So, let's see. The last one I want to show you here is creating a data list. So a data list is a little more complicated, and it does require you to use a label for state list, and we're going to say here, please enter your state. All right, or we can say, we'll do a grade list. Please enter your desired grade for the course. All right, if only this is all you had to do, was just tell me what you wanted to get, and that's what you get. All right, so that label tells us what we're going to do. I now create an input, type text, the name we can give it for grade, the ID is going to be grade list, and now I have to give it one more thing. I need to attach it to my data list. So I'm going to use the list attribute, and I'm going to call this, I'll call it, we already used grade list, so I'm just going to use list. All right, not very inventive, but we'll try to get this done. So now I create a data list. This one's a little tricky. You have to use the / there, and then I have to give it an ID. And we'll give it the ID of list, just like we used before. And it's just like select. We have options, right? So we'll do options and value A. We'll show. Now here, we don't have to put anything in between the options because the value will actually show up. So let's do option value B plus, and let's just copy a bunch of these. Control C, enter D, that's a B minus, C plus, C minus, D plus, D, don't know who's going to do this last option, but you never know. So there's the B, there's the B minus, over here we do a C plus, a C, do a C minus, D plus, D, and we'll just make this one your choice, sir. All right, so there's our values, the different options you have to pick from, and let's see what happens when we run this. Again, our break here, and refresh. Okay, so here's the drop down. Here's all the options you have to pick from. Now, how is this different than a select? Well, select, notice when I click on it, it's what I have, right? There's no option to type. But here, there seems to be a cursor that allows me to type. So I can choose B, and it narrows my field down to just the B options. If I say C, it narrows it to the C options. Notice it also gives me your choice, sir, because that has a C in it. So, but if I say C plus, there's only one that has those two characters together. So you can just click on here and pick whatever you want, or you can start typing to narrow down what options you have to pick from. So there is all the different inputs, the different form elements that you can use. The last thing we're going to do here is create the submit button, which we saw before, but let's take a look again. We don't need a label for this. We're just going to do an input type submit, and all we're going to give that is a value of submit. All right, so let's refresh, and there we have our form, our survey. I can click the submit button, and here you see it takes me to my practice page. And that's a landing that says, thank you for submitting your order. You can click here, and it takes you back, and you can do another one. All right? So that's it for today. I hope you found this informative and useful. Let me know if you have questions.